Friday night. The weekend is here, but you can't get your weekend started without listening to the voice of reason, the voice of the millennial generation on, well, another episode of Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA and, of course, BeyondReasonRadio.com. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, as always, and I'm joined by producing, as always, of course, Mr. Tom Benson. Good morning, Tom.
Hi, everybody.
Or good afternoon. I say good morning. I'm used to doing the morning show.
Sure.
I produce Bud Hedinger Live every morning on this station, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., and then Friday nights, they let me be the voice of reason that sifts through everything in the news that is beyond reason. So that's what I'm going to do tonight.
So that means you have no reason on the other nights of the week?
No. Well, I have sleep every other night of the week. But tonight, I have a lot to talk about. And, of course, the big story in the news this week, which I'm sure Tom Benson has so many opinions on, is Deflategate. Isn't that the big story? Isn't that the story that affects the whole country, Tom Benson? Isn't that the story?
You would think so, yeah. So,
with all of the attention that has been on it, who cares about Hillary Clinton and her scandal? This is the scandal of the century.
Some people think that Tom Brady's going to get suspended for up to an entire year. I don't know about that because I think the TV networks are going to put some pressure on the NFL front office and say, hey, no Brady, no ratings. No ratings, no money, you know?
Yeah, for real. And he won't. There's not enough evidence. You have to have evidence to suspend him. Right. They're not going to suspend him. I mean,
you can't do something on probably. Either yes or no, you know?
Did you hear my plan?
No, it's not.
This is my plan. This is what I want to happen. I want Tom Brady waterboarded because I want the truth. I want him waterboarded, and then if he's found guilty, we cut off his hands. How about that? So he can't throw anymore. Does that sound objective to anybody? That's objective, right?
Send him to Gitmo.
yes. Waterboarded, Gitmo. It's not torture, so it's fine. I don't support torture. Just waterboarding Tom Brady. That's how it is. By the way, one way maybe we could find out the truth is let's get in touch. Let's get in touch with the NSA. And let's see if we can have the NSA spy on his phones and text messages from the past and see if maybe he knew what was going on. He knew those balls were deflated. Okay. The NSA is probably doing other things, which, speaking of the NSA, because we're going to get to some real news now, because honestly, I don't care that much about Deflategate. It's been talked to death by everyone on the planet.
The best line I heard on the whole thing was the punishment for the New England Patriots is that they have to use a fully deflated football all next season.
Yes, I like that idea. It's fully deflated. That's a good one. I like that. All right, as many of you probably know, one of the other big stories that came out today, the NSA, many of you know the program, it was called PRISM. Edward Snowden came out a couple years ago basically showing everyone how the NSA is doing a lot more than they said they were doing, spying on more phone calls, spying on cell phone activity, they say, of Americans and patterns, in quotation mark, patterns of phone calls to try to track terrorists. But it's a mass collection of data. It's not like they're just targeting terrorists as much as they thought. It's a total mass collection of data. And Edward Snowden revealed that. But a federal court of appeals in New York ruled yesterday that the once secret National Security Agency program is illegal. Which, yes, of course it's illegal. It's not what Congress gave them the power to do. The whole thing started under the Patriot Act, but apparently Congress and the executive branch has gone way over what the Patriot Act, the powers that give it. And we had a big debate on the morning show this morning about this, too. And many people are torn because people like me and Edward Snowden and Rand Paul really want to get rid of the whole program, or at least have a very good way of putting a check on it. You know, they say, oh, it has warrants through the FISA court, but those are just general warrants or not specific warrants for specific situations. And others, like Bud and many conservatives, this is not something that all conservatives agree with or all liberals agree with. It's split down the middle. It's not a party right-left thing in terms of the NSA. But a lot of people think we need it. We need this for our safety. And yes, we need a right balance, but this is the right balance. We need it for our safety, and especially with ISIS and how ISIS is getting worse. And we had the situation in Texas earlier this week. Of course, the NSA didn't stop that. It was a local cop there who happened to be there, armed. A vigilant individual is what stopped that, not the NSA. But we apparently need the NSA because we would have more 9/11 terrorist attacks without it. So the question comes up, as it's come up before. What is the right balance? Because we need national security, but we don't need it so much that it gets rid of our liberty, our individual liberty, our property rights, our privacy rights. And this seems to do that. And Rand Paul is really the only presidential candidate that I have seen that has addressed this at all. You know, I'm a big fan of Ted Cruz, for instance. He's probably the one I'm going to vote for. But that's something he doesn't really get into. He seems to be for it from everything I've seen. You know, they kind of have lip service that, we need to make sure it's not going too far and blah, 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 but it's not. Rand Paul is the only one who is boldly standing up against this program. And by the way, what Rand Paul did today, as this court announced that it was illegal according to the court, Rand Paul sells webcam blockers on his website that says Paul 2016 on it. You can put on your webcam on your computer. And he did a fire sale today of those. He put those on sale for cheap today. And you can get the Rand Paul webcam blocker on randpaul.com if you are afraid the NSA is going to hack into your computer. And, you know, as far-fetched as that sounds, there was a reporter not too long ago that actually had video of the government hacking into her computer and deleting files, because she was going to do a whole news story on this. I forget who that was. I need to look that up, but she actually was seeing it in front of her face, video of them like deleting stuff on her computer, and she got out her cell phone and she took video of it. So it's very, as far-fetched as it sounds when Rand Paul says something like that, apparently it seems that they have the power to do that. So it's very interesting. And another thing you might find interesting about the NSA, I'm sure a lot of you are fans of Terminator, the Terminator movies. And there's a new one coming out this year with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator Genesis, that I look forward to seeing. But apparently, this is according to Wired.com, apparently the NSA has an actual Skynet program. I kid you not. A Skynet. Skynet, if you can remember from the movies, was the bad guy, was the artificial intelligence computer program that eventually took over the world, created Terminators, and wanted to kill humans. Okay, so the NSA Skynet program is not what is going to be, it's not used for that, but they actually call it Skynet. And it doesn't do, obviously, that, but it does have a program called Skynet, but unlike the Terminator one, this one is a surveillance program that uses phone metadata to track the location and call activities of suspected terrorists. A journalist for Al Jazeera reportedly became one of its targets after he was placed on a terrorist watch list. So don't get placed on a terrorist watch list, or you're going to have Skynet, evil big Skynet after you. You think the NSA would probably rename it something other than Skynet. I mean, is this a joke? Or just trying to be evil at this point? By the way, Tom, thank you. It was Cheryl Atkinson who had that problem.
Former CBS correspondent.
Yeah, former CBS correspondent. And she, she's not a big conservative or anything like that, but she was really worried about things the government was doing, transparency, and they were going after her. And she posted that video on YouTube from her phone of them literally hacking into her computer. She's watching it happen as they're doing it, and it's scary stuff. So what Rand Paul is selling, a webcam blocker, doesn't sound as far-fetched. So we have Skynet out there, mass surveillance out there, the PRISM program that Edwin Snowden gave to us a couple years ago. And do we really need all this for our safety? Do we really need all this for our security? That's the question I have for you. 407-674-1025. Do we really need it? Do you feel safer because we have all these programs? What really worries me about this program, about the NSA and this mass collection of data, is how far is too far? How much power are we willing to give the federal government? Because what is happening is they've created an infrastructure that can be abused very easily. All it takes is the wrong people in office, Obama for one, to be able to abuse a program like this to promote tyranny and to get rid of more and more of our individual liberty. And I'm speaking directly to my generation, the millennial generation, the Yaffee generation, because we're the ones that use this technology the most. And this technology is not only a part of our social lives, it's now a part of our love lives, it's a part of our work lives. It's a big part of who we are in this generation. Do you want the government abusing that to have more control over you and take away more of your private property rights? To have so-called national security, which, of course, didn't stop the Boston bombers, didn't stop this guy in Texas. There was the underwear bomber. You know what stopped them? Individuals on that plane stopped him. There was the shoe bomber. The only thing that stopped him was that he couldn't get it to light right. Do we really need it? 407-674-1025. Edward Snowden, a couple years ago, was the one who was interviewed about this. And he said something that really stuck in my brain about why this is a problem. Why this worries me and why I support Rand Paul and his efforts against it. And there are others I'm going to get to who are against it. But this is what Edward Snowden had to say about it. And he sounds very serious. He's very reasonable when he says this. This is what he said about it a couple years ago.
The only thing that restricts the activities of the surveillance state are policy. Even our agreements with other sovereign governments, we consider that to be a stipulation of policy rather than a stipulation of law. And because of that, a new leader will be elected. They'll flip the switch, say that because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, some new and unpredicted threat, we need more authority, we need more power, and there will be nothing the people can do at that point to oppose it, and it'll be turnkey tyranny.
It'll be turnkey tyranny. The infrastructure set in place, and he's saying his point is look, we're going to get to a point where things could get worse or could be some kind of crisis. He said this a couple years ago, and now we're hearing this today. There could be some kind of crisis out there where we're going to need to have more power. We're going to need to use this for more. Who cares if it takes away your individual liberty? This is happening today with ISIS. The FBI came out this week saying that they don't know how they're going to stop ISIS. Because ISIS is everywhere on the internet. They're in the deep web. They're recruiting people. People go on encrypted websites and they can't find them. So they think they're going to want to expand the NSA program. They're going to want to expand the PRISM program. Do we need it? Or is it turnkey tyranny? I tend to agree with Edward Snowden saying that it's turnkey tyranny. 407-674-1025. You agree or disagree? You are listening to Beyond Reason Radio at beyondreasonradio.com and News Radio 102.5 WFLA. Welcome back to Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA and streaming live at beyondreasonradio.com. By the way, my show is everywhere. I am everywhere on social media and the internet. You can follow me at Michael Yaffee on Twitter, and I'll follow you back. Also, you can like the Facebook page, Beyond Reason Radio. So it's facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Click the like button. I post a lot of good stuff, the episodes and all that stuff. The podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spreaker, everywhere. So a lot of different ways to connect with the show. So, and by the way, this show basically is a grassroots thing. I am not some kind of owner of a media empire. It's really just me. I'm just a young guy trying to start my career in radio, trying to get the truth out there, and like I said, be the voice of reason. So I'm really dependent, and I'm very thankful to all the listeners of this show, and I'm really dependent on you to spread the word. Spread the word. So I really appreciate anyone out there who listens. Make sure to share. If you like something on my Facebook page, make sure to share it with your friends and all that stuff. I really appreciate that. I'm totally dependent on you and the grassroots to get this show going. So I've been talking about the NSA, of course. I played Edward Snowden's cut from a couple years ago where he said it could be turnkey tyranny. All it takes is a crisis to happen, and we're starting to see crises happen. So, and I want to talk to Matt in Orlando, who called in and had a comment on this. Matt, what do you think is the right balance between national security and privacy and private property rights? Is the NSA program going too far?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for taking my call.
Oh, of course, Matt. Thank you for listening.
Roger that. What I wanted to say is, yes, I do believe they're going too far. As a retired service member myself, I do know that being in the war zone, a lot of times we had to go out there and meet and greet the folks in these various cities and towns, and we had to get the intel ourselves. We weren't being fed that intel. We had to go door to door, and we had to find out, where the threats were.
Right.
At home, it seems like we're putting out a massive hysteria situation where everyone is. This is doom and gloom, and we're never going to survive unless we give them the power to snoop and give them the power to do this and that. At the end of the day, people aren't being diligent enough to follow on the leads that they're getting. They're not knocking on doors. They're not going out and.
That's a really interesting point you're making, because it seems like we're so dependent on the technology that we think it's going to replace good old-fashioned intelligence work. Like being in the field, like knocking on doors, like you said.
Right. They're not doing that anymore. And the thing about it is that and when you're not doing that, you're actually allowing things to fester, so to speak, to continue to prolong. And then, God forbid, a situation happens where we do get hit, and it could have been prevented based on good old-fashioned investigation, just like it was done many years ago. These things still work. I also wanted to touch on the fact that, back to the fact that when we were involved in the war over there, at the end of the day, we prevented a lot of harm to ourselves, and also, we're able to complete our missions based on the fact that we went out and we got the information. And I still believe that the truth is to be said here at home. If we were to be more diligent and put faith back into the American people to do their due diligence, to bring forth
Matt,
information.
you bring up an excellent point that I want to raise about this. Matt, thank you for your call. We're expecting the technology to sort of replace individual vigilance. That's the only thing that is going to be able to stop terrorist attacks and mass killings and stuff like that, is individuals being aware of what's going on around them, helping their fellow citizen, and frankly, some of them being armed. I'm not saying I want a war zone in our streets where we're just fighting wars all the time, but I always believed that the best way to stop a bad person with a gun, or even a bad person with a bomb or a bad person with anything, is a good person with a gun. Because these terrorists, they're going to want to eventually attack places like malls. They're doing it overseas already. They're going to want to attack places, malls, hotels, schools, places they know where people are not going to be able to defend themselves. Airports, for instance. They're doing that overseas now. We have mass killers with mental health problems doing it here, but they're going to want to do it here. And that's what this terrorist in Texas wanted to do. It was a place he could go. There was a lot of people there. And it's going to take individual cops, for instance, doing intelligence work like you said, but just individuals in general who are able to protect themselves, either because they're armed and they can defend themselves, or because they're just aware of what's going on around them and they're aware of wanting to help their fellow citizen and not just in their own bubble. And I think that's the message we need to get out, is individual vigilance is going to be the real security. An informed, vigilant population that's not going to put up with terrorists doing stuff like this. And we're so dependent on the technology doing it. And technology is great. New technology is great. But you're right. It can't replace a human being with their brain going out into the field and doing intelligence work. So I think, Matt, you bring up a good point, and thank you for your call. 407-674-1025, 855-545-1025 if you have a take on this as well. You know, I found an article here talking about this from one of my favorite people, Judge Andrew Napolitano. He does a lot for Fox News and whatever, and he has been on the NSA thing as well since the beginning. He's been basically on the side of Rand Paul and Snowden, talking about how this goes way beyond constitutional limits. And I found an article he had this week where he's talking about there's a movement out there, starting on college campuses, but other places. I posted something on Twitter about it called Restore the Fourth. And you might think that means the 4th of July. No, it means the Fourth Amendment. Restore the Fourth Amendment. Because, you know, after 9/11, we adopted the Patriot Act. And he was mentioning that there's some good things, some bad things. And he talks about one of its sections in the Patriot Act permits federal agents to write down their own search warrants and serve them on persons and entities who by law are custodians of records about others. The same section of that act has been used perversely by the NSA and the secret FISA court to authorize the bulk collection of data. Bulk collection of data, the indiscriminate government acquisition of contents, text messages, phone calls, stuff like that, is what the NSA is doing. But the warrant issued by the FISA court that authorized it is known as a general warrant. And that's unconstitutional. A general warrant does not name a person or a place, but authorizes the bearer to search wherever he wishes and seize whatever he finds. General warrants were a tool of colonial repression used by the king prior to the American Revolution. They were issued by secret courts in London. They were so loathed by the framers and the founding fathers that they are expressly forbidden in the Fourth Amendment. He makes an excellent point. This is the problem with giving the government this much power. It's unconstitutional. And once you've opened the door to that much power, you have to look down the road. You know, I talk a lot of this show, I'm the voice of the millennial generation, and it's my generation, it's us who are going to be affected by this in the future. People like me, you know, I'm 29 now. We can't just think about what's going on today. We have to think what's going on in the future, what's going to happen to our kids and our grandkids. So when we see something like that, we get concerned. So I'm with Judge Andrew Napolitano, and restoring the Fourth. So I like that. I'm going to spread that campaign more. Restore the Fourth. In the next segment, I'm going to get into another issue that's very divisive among all people, not just between right and left, and that's Social Security. Another thing that really affects my generation. It's affecting the old generation, but it's really going to affect my generation more. And we're going to get into what some of the presidential candidates are saying about that now. 407-674-1025. You are listening to Beyond Reason Radio, News Radio 102.5 WFLA, and streaming live beyondreasonradio.com. You are listening to Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA and beyondreasonradio.com. Make sure to check out my website, beyondreasonradio.com. You can catch all the cool things. Also links to a couple of books that I've written if you're interested. One is called Simple Writings from a Young Christian. It's got some testimonials in there that you could read one a day, very short. And another one called What's Up Habakkuk, which is about the book of Habakkuk, which goes into that book, and it's really good because it helps. The book of Habakkuk really helps give you faith in a fallen world and when times are tough. And I go into that, and it's really, really a good thing. So, Mike Huckabee this week has been getting into the issue of Social Security. And he seems to be taking a different road than most of the other Republican candidates have been taking. And what I mean by that is he's basically defending it as is. He talks about how basically Social Security, well, he's basically telling old people, look, you've been paying into it your whole life. You should receive it, all of it, at 65, like you were promised. And I understand why he's taking that role. He's not talking reform. He's not talking anything. You can tell he's pandering to the older voters, and he wants to win Florida, which has a lot of older voters. So it's definitely about politics. And this is one reason I can't vote for Mike Huckabee. The other reason is he was a big supporter of Common Core. He says he's not now. Of course, conveniently, he's not now. He told people he wanted to change the name. The state should change the name of Common Core to pass it or whatever. And he's like, now it's become something it wasn't originally. Okay, sure, Mike Huckabee, sure. It's the same as what it was originally. It's nationalization of our education system. He talks about, well, we still need state standards if we don't have the national standards. Blah, blah, blah. I've talked about education on this show enough. I'll talk about it another week. But I want to get into the Social Security thing because here is a conservative Republican who's basically not even going to address one of the big issues in terms of government spending, in terms of the size of government. And the fact is that it has to be reformed. Now, if you ask anybody in the millennial generation, in my generation, if they think they're going to get Social Security one day, most of them are going to tell you no. They don't expect it, or if they do get it, it's not going to help them much. So, this is where we are, and I understand the point that Mike Huckabee's making. Yeah, you paid into it. You do deserve it. But if you want it to survive, it's going to have to be reformed. And here's some details that you might find interesting why it might not survive. I found this from CNBC. Really interesting. The Social Security Administration projects that its trust funds will be depleted by 2033. 2033. Most people in my generation are not going to be getting Social Security in 2033. Not only that, but new studies from Harvard and Dartmouth researchers find that the Social Security Administration's forecasts have been consistently overstating the financial health of the program's trust funds. They believe that fund reserves for both its combined retirement and disability programs will grow until 2019. Program costs are projected to exceed income in 2020. It's only 5 years away, people. 2020, the costs will exceed income. And then the whole trust fund will be depleted by 2033. Annual revenues from payroll tax would be projected to cover only 3/4 of scheduled Social Security benefits through 2088. And I think that's being optimistic. There's the problem. When people in my generation see stories like that, they don't think they're going to get it. And I know there are people dependent on it, and I know anyone who's turning 65 now should get it. But we're going to have to reform it. And there's talk about raising the retirement age, and that might be a good idea. But I think we're going to need real reform because I think it's not the government's role to be your retirement bank. Why we ever thought it was a good idea for the government to play your financial advisor and expected them to do a good job, I don't know. But we have to get away from that mentality that the government's a good bank for you. Because it's not, it never has been, and it never will be. We need something to reform it. And I actually have a call on this before I get more into this. Bob in Orlando. I'm wondering if you agree or disagree with me.
No, I agree with you, except for one thing.
Yes.
Social Security was a good thing, but you got people on Medicaid, right?
Yes.
Actually, where do you think all your money's going? I'm on Social Security, right? I got a $15 raise a month, when the people on Medicaid got 33% more.
Okay.
So what I'm saying to you, right? You got 93 million people out of jobs in this country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're collecting money, right?
Yes.
You could be working all you want to try to survive and everything like that, right? But you got all them freeloaders that's taking the money out of the system. And that's where the problem lies. Just like that woman over there in Baltimore, right? She has 5 kids, right? Well, fine. If you live in Baltimore, if a woman over there got 2 kids, she gets $35,000.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's usually, thank you for your call, Bob. And I agree, that's usually the issue with Social Security people have. Well, the freeloaders are getting all this money. Why can't I get the money? I've paid into it. I'm not saying because I want to reform Social Security, I'm not saying that we should keep all those other programs. I want to get rid of a lot of those programs and reform those programs too. The point I'm trying to make is the Social Security is not, it's the government playing your retirement bank. And when Social Security got started that many years ago, people didn't live that long. It was for worst case scenarios, for people that really couldn't work, people that didn't have the money. And it was started under FDR, under the New Deal, under the change of the idea of what government is supposed to be in our lives. And now, even a lot of conservatives even expect the government to be our retirement bank. And that is not the true role of government. To tax you and then put it in a trust fund somewhere and then give it back to you. That should be the role of free individuals in a free society. Now, I get that people have been doing that. They've been expecting it, and they deserve that money. Now, we might have to raise the retirement age a little bit in the meantime because, frankly, they're going to run out of money. And if you think you're just going to get rid of welfare and all that stuff to keep Social Security, it's not going to happen. And when you think about it, too, Social Security is really what opened the door to all those other things. Once it became the government's role to take care of you when you were old, it also became the government's role to take care of you when you were sick, old and sick, Medicare, your health. It became the government's role to take care of you if you lost your husband. It became the government's role to take care of you if you needed food through food stamps. And we've expanded the government's role to all these things, and now it's way out of control. And that's what happens when you change the government's role and what it was supposed to be. We're way beyond it now. And I'm not even talking about getting rid of it. I'm just talking about reforming it. And people are getting it because they're used to that being the government's role. And they become dependent on it. That's what happens to the government. Eva, what's your take on this?
Yes, Yaffee, I agree with what you're saying, but I want to tell you something. You're not informed enough to talk about this because you said before I came on that FDR started it. That's a lie. FDR started Social Security back then, but not Medicare and Medicaid.
I know. I said FDR started Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid was started during Johnson.
Flip that. You said FDR, you mentioned his name's all I know. But Johnson started Medicare.
I know. Johnson started Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of the welfare programs, the Great Society, the War on Poverty.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. I called to tell you what was going on after FDR finished. FDR, in his day, they had what they call old folks' homes. And evidently they...
Old folks? They have those now.
Yeah, to these... They sent the old people to these homes, and it was like, I don't really know. This is what my parents told me. It was like a work farm, and they worked for their upkeep or for their needs and stuff. And they were starving to death and just dying. So then that's when Johnson came up with the Great Society. And at that time, it is nothing like it is now.
Okay,
for
Eva.
Example,
Yeah.
my mother didn't have to have supplemental insurance. She just paid.
Right, and see, Eva, that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that, yes, it's not what it was when it started, but that's why you don't have the government start those things in the first place. You have to have vision for the future. Yes, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, it might have been a decent idea when it was started, but it's become this big behemoth thing because you have to understand the role of government. And when you start something, even with good intentions, it's going to create something entirely different when you have the government do it, because it doesn't have the same accountabilities, the same checks that the marketplace has, that free individuals have in a free society. And that's why we have all these problems today. And that was why conservatives were against Obamacare in the beginning. Because, yeah, it might be good intentions, it might help some people now, but they knew that it's going to grow. It has already, but it's going to grow into something much bigger, much worse, much too expensive in the future. So when I get behind this microphone, I'm going to talk about what's happening to us now, but we have to have vision for the future. We have to see the big picture. And if we want any of it to survive for my generation, if we want this country to survive, if we want our government to survive, things like Social Security are going to have to be reformed. There's just no other way. There's no other thing that can happen. Has to be done. 407-674-1025. You're listening to Beyond Reason Radio, News Radio 1025 WFLA and BeyondReasonRadio.com. Welcome back to Beyond Reason Radio. I was taking some flack, which I knew I would because of my take on Social Security. I mean, my point is not to just get rid of it today. I understand it, but there has to be reform. There just has to be. And I guess maybe I was getting a little too philosophical, but my main point is we have to get back to what the true role of government is supposed to be, which is under the Constitution. And we've gone way too far from that. And that's why we're in the problems we have today. $18 trillion in debt, $70 trillion in unfunded liabilities, a massive bureaucracies that infringe on our liberties, make it hard to do business, send businesses overseas, all that stuff. And I'm just trying to get us back to roll because I'm trying to save the country, not only for me and my generation, but my future kids and grandkids. So let's see what Dennis has to say. Dennis, how are you? Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello.
What's your take on Social Security?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Listen, you were talking about the government being responsible for our retirement and all that. Why doesn't the people who's not collecting on retirement send us our money back and let us save it ourselves?
I agree with you. That would be an interesting.
Just getting into the workforce, either you save or you go without in the end.
George W. Bush, when he was president, had a reform similar to that, where you could choose to keep that money and put it somewhere else instead of it just going in the Social Security trust fund. That would be a way to reform it instead of.
The government won't have nothing to do with it.
Right. So it seems like you kind of agree with me that it needs to be reformed.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, keep the government out as much as possible.
Yeah, because they just mess things up. Dennis, you're awesome. Yeah, I had a call agree with me. That's good. That makes me feel better. All right, I want to switch topics here before the end of the show. And basically, last week I talked a lot about what was going on in Baltimore and the riots. And I just happened to see this story on Media where Chris Rock, he did an interview actually with The Guardian. And this is someone who tries to be, influential in the African American community. Someone that a lot of people would respect and agree with and things. And this is what he says. What's weird when talking about people getting shot by police brutality, of course. What's weird is that it never happens to white kids, he continued. There's no evidence that white youngsters are any less belligerent, We can go to any Wall Street bar and they are way bigger a-holes than in any other black bar. But will I see cops stop shooting black kids in my lifetime? Probably not. Wow. What a divisive thing. Thank you, Chris Rock, to making things even more divisive. Now, that's part of his shtick, is to be to get attention for himself. Pandering, yes. But we need true leadership, and that's not it. Now, he's just a comedian, but this is someone a lot of people respect. And he says stuff like this, which is patently not even true. There are plenty of stories out there of white kids being shot by cops, white people being shot by cops. By the numbers, more whites are killed by cops than blacks every year. Now, by percentage, a larger percentage of blacks. But to say something blatant as white kids are never shot, it's absurd, it's illogical, it's not true. So to bring something like that up is ridiculous. And to say, I'll never stop seeing it in my lifetime. Well, you're never going to stop seeing any white people not being shot by cops, because it's part of the cops' job is to stop criminals, and sometimes they have to shoot them. So it's never going to stop completely because it's crime. So it's illogical. So I'm looking at that, and then I wanted to say, okay, where is a true leader, at least for the African American community? And I found some comments from Ben Carson, who's running for president now. He went to Detroit, where he grew up, which has a lot of the same problems. But he also went to Baltimore to talk about this stuff. And he had some comments on it. And then think about what Chris Rock said. And then you have a reasonable guy, a reasonable African-American leader, someone that blacks really should look up to. Think about his comments, what he said about this.
There are going to be bad apples everywhere. There are going to be bad apples in police departments, in school systems, in hospitals, even in news agencies. And we can't judge the entire entity by those. We need to look at the whole picture. But of course, whenever we find evidence of corruption, we need to weed it out. There's no question about that. And, a situation like the one that sparked this trouble, obviously there's a cloud of suspicion there. And it will be investigated. You're not going to be able to sweep this under the rug, which I think a lot of people are concerned about. But it sometimes does take time to ferret out all the details.
There's a guy who's a real leader when it comes to this kind of things and has a reasonable, logical approach and is going to the communities himself. He went to Baltimore this week to talk to faith leaders about this, wanting to address the real issues at stake here. And I'm going to play one more cut here of him, and he talks about the solutions maybe to some of these problems.
I think whenever you find a situation where you have a concentration of people and a lot of poverty, I don't think it's going to matter that much what their race is. I think you're going to find a lot of conflict and the kinds of troubles that we're seeing in those situations. So we need to deal with the basic economic issues, providing people with a mechanism to climb out of a state of dependency and to provide real hope. We can do this. I speak at a lot of fundraisers for community-type organizations which have invested in other people, and it works. It works extraordinarily well. And we need to be looking at those programs and expanding on them.
So there's a true leader wanting to address the real issue. Not this straw man, this whole racism, police brutality issue, but wanting to get to the core of the issue in the black community because he really cares and really wants to solve the problem. And so one more cut here. He was asked if he saw the video of the mom who caught her kid rioting and she basically whooped his butt. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of my own mother. She probably would have done that if I'd been out there doing that. There's no question. There's a reason that children have parents, and the reason that they have guardians. These are people who supposedly have experienced life and have some wisdom and know that it's foolish to be out there, rioting and destroying the livelihood of good, decent people.
See, once again, he talks about the real solution. That's why we need parents in a society. And, we talked about the Great Society earlier and the War on Poverty. Those programs and the government growing destroyed the job of having parents. It destroyed families, and it's caused this mess. So I just wanted to give you the contrast. Hopefully, people in the black communities will listen to someone like Ben Carson. A reasonable leader, a real leader who wants to address these issues, who's going to those communities. And not someone like Chris Rock. Remember, people, he's just a comedian. He's just trying to get attention. But he's a leader for a lot of people, so we don't listen to him. All right, thank you for listening. That's all the time we have. But, of course, I'll be back next week. Been listening to Beyond Reason Radio. Make sure to go to my Facebook page, like that, and BeyondReasonRadio.com. Catch you guys next week. From indifference, I look inside.